What's up guys, Asian here again with another build video. This time we're going to be going over the Magicka Dragonknight DPS for Clockwork City. So like the rest of our build videos, we'll be going over our gear sets as well as our skill bars and our CP points. Then we're going to finish things off with a 3 million dummy parse, and we'll get a look at our combat metrics report. And we're going to kind of discuss the intricacies and kind of where Magicka DKs are at in terms of endgame content. So we're going to start things off first with our gear choice. For our gear, we're running 2-piece Grothar, 1 heavy and 1 medium. And for our armor, we're going to be using Burning Spellweave. This comes from City of Ash, the dungeon, either 1 or 2. You can also use Silks of the Sun, that is purchasable off guild traders. However, Burning Spellweave, it'll give you higher DPS on average compared to Silks of the Sun. The other option that you can also use instead of Grothar is Valken Scoria. You'll see here that I'm using a health enchant instead of a magic enchant on my helm, and that's just because I'm using Witchmother's Potent Brew to give me a little bit extra sustain. However, that also results in lower health. You can see they are 3511 max health versus I believe it's about 5200 with blue food. But in return, we do get the Magicka regen, which really helps out with Magicka DKs. Even though our sustain is very good in a good group, in dungeons, in situations where you don't have a lot of lightning walls and off-balance uptime, the extra regen is really going to help out here. For our jewelry in our second set, we have Master Architect with spell damage enchants on all of our jewelry pieces. Now you can go with Moon Dancer or Infallible Aether as your jewelry. Those two other sets still give you the Minor Slayer bonus. You'll pull higher with Master Architect and Moon Dancer compared to Infallible Aether, but the DPS difference is pretty small in general, so it's kind of a which staff do you get first. Once you get that staff, then it's pretty much pick your jewelry to match that staff. For our staves, we have Inferno Staff infused with a fire damage enchant. You can go with a shock damage enchant if you so choose. However, in a raid group where you have plenty of lightning walls and plenty of off balance, you can afford to be a little bit more selfish and go with flame damage instead of shock damage enchant, but those are both viable enchant options. And for our back bar, again, because with a good group you don't need to necessarily run Lightning Staff, we're going to be running an Inferno Staff instead with a weapon damage enchant with Nirnhoned as our trait. You can go with Sharpened or Infused. Infused will give you a little bit higher single target DPS, but the Nirnhoned on the back bar will give you better AoE damage and better damage if you end up having to heavy attack on that bar compared to Infused. So I prefer Nirnhoned over Infused, but either of them works. It really depends on your RNG with Maelstrom Arena. Going over our stats real quick, all points are into Magicka. Even with Witchmothers, we're at 16.4k health. If you decide to use Scoria instead, it'll actually go up a couple of hundred points, but if you do want to hit 17k health, put a few points into health instead of Magicka. I believe you need only 7 or 8 points into health in order to hit that 17k mark for Vet Trials content. For our Mundus Stone, I just realized I haven't picked up the Mundus yet. We're going to be going with the Apprentice. You can go with Lover. It all depends on your group composition, kind of what kind of debuff you're getting. If you have stuff like Alkosh and Power of the Light from the Stamplar or your healers, then you might not need to use the Lover in order to hit the penetration cap. You can go with CP points instead to kind of fine-tune yourself so you do end up hitting your penetration cap. I prefer using CP over the Lover because you do get a little bit more finer control over hitting that 18k penetration. For our skill bars, we have Harness Magicka. You can also use the other morph, which is Dampen Magic. We have Flame Lash, Engulfing Flames, Burning Embers, Inner Light, and we have our Destruction Staff ultimate. We are not actually going to be using this ultimate in battles against bosses or trash. This is just here so we can maintain our Ancient Knowledge passive. So if we go down to our Destruction Staff line, a lot of people don't realize you need to have a Destruction Staff ability slotted in order to have this have that 8% extra damage to single target abilities. You can see right there, you gain bonus effects based on your staff type while you have a destruction staff ability slotted. Now we are going to replace this with Elemental Drain for the purposes of our Parse, but because you will normally have your shield there, your shield is not a destruction staff ability, so we're going to be keeping the Destro Staff ultimate in order to keep Ancient Knowledge up. On our back bar, Eruption, Flames of Oblivion, Blockade of Fire, Rearming Trap, and we have Inner Light again with Standard of Might. This is going to be the ultimate that we end up using on boss fights and on trash pulls. Looking at our champion point distributions, you have 230 points to put into each of the 3 slots. 75 Tenacity, 75 in Arcanist, those are the 2 ones you want to maintain. The rest 80 points can be put into the next 3 nodes, however you'd like. I have 28 in Shadow Word, 26 in Tumbling, and 26 in Warlord. This helps to maintain some stamina. You have to block cast. Now, this is where things are going to differ depending on your group. This particular CP distribution is optimized for the raid group that I personally run with as a DPS, where we only have Infused Thorax Crusher and a Stamplar providing Power of the Light. So this is optimized for that specific composition. Now, if you have Infused Crusher, Alkosh, and Power of the Light, then you definitely will not need this many points in the Spell Erosion, so you can take those out and put them back into other nodes to help increase your DPS. So talk with your raid lead, figure out what sort of uptimes you can expect on things like Alkosh, Power of the Light, what kind of debuffs you're looking at, and then put points into Spell Erosion accordingly. I have 34 in Elfborn, 49 in Elemental Expert, 34 in Mastered Arms, and 75 in Thaumaturge. Maintain 75 in Thaumaturge no matter what. You want that Exploiter passive. Its Exploiter passive is still very powerful in Clockwork City. Now, if you need to put points out of the nodes to put into Spell Erosion, I recommend taking out of Elfborn first, and then Mastered Arms, followed by Elemental Expert. Only touch Elemental Expert if you absolutely need to. Because Magicka DPS are running lower spell crit chance compared to previous patches, taking out of Elfborn first is preferable because you will have a lower impact on your DPS this way. And finally, for our red CPs, you can redistribute these accordingly depending on the content you're running. For example, in Hellra Citadel, you will see more physical damage versus magic damage, so you might want to put points out of Elemental Defender, put them into Hardy. This particular configuration is meant for as a one-size-fits-most configuration. 44 in Ironclad, 40 into Thickskin, 56 Hardy, 56 Elemental Defender, and 34 into Bastion. Other important things I've already talked about, we're going to be using Witch Mothers in order to help us sustain, but for potions we're going to be using Essence of Spell Power. This is made with Warrior Hyacinth, Lady Smock, and Cornflower. Gives us Major Sorcery, Major Prophecy, and Major Intellect. Make sure you have Alchemy all the way up to level 50, and make sure you have Medicinal Use all the way up so you can maintain those 3 buffs as long as you keep using your potions on cooldown. Now, there is some discussion out there among the theory crafters as to whether Magicka DK should run a Maelstrom Inferno Staff on the back bar or a Maelstrom Lightning Staff on the back bar. And the toss-up is kind of, it depends. If you are running in a very Magicka heavy group and your trial group, for example, if you have 5 or 6 Magicka DPS, it's a very good chance that they are all running Lightning Walls. So you can afford to be selfish in this case and run Inferno Staff instead of a Lightning Staff, because you already have very high off-balance uptime with 5 Magicka DPS, for example, all running Lightning Walls, and you have your 2 healers running Lightning Walls. So that's 7 Lightning Walls right there, so adding your own won't increase off-balance uptime all that much. So, you know, Flame Lash, you can see there, off-balance is very important to Magicka DK sustain, because of that off-balance proc on Flame Lash. It basically is a free cast of Flame Lash anytime you are targeting an off-balance enemy. So again, it all depends. If you have fewer Magicka DPS, you can use a Lightning Staff instead to help maintain your off-balance, because every time you use that Flame Lash proc, you are eating up that off-balance. In other words, you're using that up so other people aren't getting that Exploiter passive. By using a lightning staff instead of an inferno staff, you're kind of making up for your consumption of off balance, but at the same time you're also going to be losing DPS, personal DPS, just because you're not using an inferno staff, and DKs get some pretty sizable DPS boosts from fire damage, especially as a dark elf DK. So pick and choose. I prefer running an Inferno staff versus a Lightning staff because of the groups I run with. I know I can rely on my Magicka DPS to maintain off-balance uptime. If you're running in a group that is, for example, 4 Magicka DPS and 4 Stamina DPS, then it might be worthwhile to use an extra Lightning Wall, because now you only have 3 Magic. You have 3 DPS running Lightning Wall and 2 healers, so you only have 5 Lightning Walls. So you might want to run lightning staffs in that scenario, just because your stamina DPS are also going to be eating up off balance with their heavy attacks. So ultimately the answer is, it depends. In some cases you can run Inferno and not see that much of a difference in uptime and off balance. Other scenarios you're going to want to run a lightning staff to maintain your off balance uptime. We're going to go ahead and start our parse here. Do keep in mind this is a 3 million dummy parse. In an actual raid scenario, your DPS is going to be different due to the buffs you're getting and the debuffs that are getting applied to your enemy, as well as the fact that the fight will take longer, so sustained problems will become more apparent in these longer fights in actual trials scenarios. Also keep in mind that we don't have any source of off balance outside of Rearming Trap and Flame Lash, so our sustain looks very bad, but in an actual trial scenario, when we do have lightning walls proccing off balance all the time, sustain on a Magicka DK actually isn't that bad. It's pretty comparable to a melee Magplar. You will have Magicka Drain overall compared to Magicka Drain overall instead of Magicka Regen, but sustain is not nearly as big of an issue as you're going to see on this parse. We're going to go ahead and start our parse in 3, 2, and 1. There we have it, a 34.8k parse approximately on a Magicka DK. So you can see here, even without lightning walls continually proccing our whips, we're still getting pretty decent DPS as a Magicka DK. The only problem with Magicka DKs is that at least the most effective setup are always going to be melee range. If we take a look at our main spammables, Flame Lash is 8 meters, Engulfing Flames is 10, Burning Embers is 5 meters, so you're going to be within melee range. The problem with that is Stamina DPS are also in melee range, but they can easily pull 10k higher than you. A Stamina Nightblade, for example, at least on a 3 mil dummy parse, I can easily pull 8k higher, 5 to 8k higher on my Stamina Nightblade compared to my Magicka DK. So you kind of have to ask yourself, you know, in a trials group, are you willing to give up that melee slot for a Magicka DK instead of a Stamplar who can give you Power of the Light, or a Stamina Nightblade who can pull 10 to 15k higher in a fully optimized group? So the answer, Magicka DKs are not highly desirable right now. Don't let that stop you from making one though. A lot of raid groups will take a Magicka DK as long as you can pull the numbers and can pull your weight in the trials group. It's just that melee Magicka DPS, for example, a traditional Magplar or Mag DK, they're just being outclassed. They're taking up a melee slot that is better suited for a stamina character that can pull higher DPS. So that's kind of where Magicka DKs are at in Clockwork City. Until we see Magicka DPS move away from an off-balance meta, I don't anticipate that changing anytime soon. So that's it for this video. Hope this guide helps, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.